Welcome. This is Sherilyn Johnson, and our team is from Aviara Real Estate. And I want to introduce to you some of the team members on the call. First, we have Scott Spindell. Scott has been an agent for as long as I have, almost 20 years, and is a great asset to our team. He's been selling and representing buyers for a long time and is a great addition to our team. And then Melanie Meixner down in the corner on my screen, at least. She actually, I was introduced to her as a client when she and her husband were moving down here from Salt Lake City, Utah. And it was pretty funny. I have to tell you, Melanie didn't get to see her house until the day of the walkthrough.
Whoa.
So her husband and we Zoomed her in or FaceTimed her in, and we showed houses to her that way. So that was one of my first nerve-wracking sales of a home. And so we went ahead and got her that home that way. And then next up, we have Laura Allen up in the corner. And Laura is a newer agent. She was licensed in October. She's doing just a fantastic job. She comes from the corporate world, and she's going to be just fantastic. I'm super excited to have her join our team. And then Kaylin Mouchouar, she is in the middle with a photo, and Kaylin is also a brand new licensee. And she's going to be fantastic too. Fun story about her. Her dad actually was one of our shareholder partners here at Aviara years ago. So she's following in her dad's footsteps. So we're excited to have her on the team, and she's going to be great. She is younger than all of us probably on this call. And so if we have any technical difficulties, Kaylin is our girl. And then next up, I've welcomed Churchill Mortgage. And so there's 3 people here on the call from Churchill. First, we have Mike Hardy. He's the principal of the team at Churchill. And then Kevin Sprague. And he is, Kevin, he is our client's point of contact when they first call in. And then we have Gabriel Lozano, and Gabe is awesome. He does a lot of the follow-up and keeps us all on track with our lives. So we're super excited to have them here. The information that they're presenting I saw it about a month ago, and it's really, really awesome. So I think you're going to enjoy this, and we'll have a little bit of Q&A time at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and turn it over to the Churchill Mortgage team.
Well, thank you, Sherilyn. We really enjoy working with your team. Really love meeting everybody that we haven't seen and meeting the new folks as well. Thank you so much for everyone joining. And Mike and Kevin, really enjoy working with you and your team. Sherilyn, thank you so much. And yeah, let's get things started. We're excited.
So good. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us today. We're going to cover some stuff, and my goal is for each one of you guys to have like an aha moment. Okay. To learn something that is kind of mind blowing. Okay. And so there's a saying we have, which is one new idea or one new relationship can completely change the trajectory of your life. One new idea or one new relationship. And we've all had them. You guys can probably think back to, that one person or that one insight that you had that just changed everything. And so we're all going on this journey of life together, and we have our families and our business, and we're building things, and we're trying to do things well. And so I think it's always important that we're learning and growing, kind of like a rushing river rather than a stagnant pond, so to speak. And so I want to start just by sharing that. And then also for some context, there's the world that we know. There's the world that we know that we don't know. And then there's this whole other world that we don't know. Okay. So think of it kind of like the computer screen you're looking at. That's the world you know. And then maybe the room you're in is the world that you don't know. and then the city you're in, the world you don't know. There's just so much out there. Okay. And so one new idea can change everything. So part of the reason we do this, guys, and have this presentation that we've put together is there is a lack of clarity that exists in the marketplace. There's so much confusion and so much noise. And so one of the things that we want to do is we have this, we call it facts, not feelings. We want to look at the facts, and then we want to empower ourselves to best serve whoever it is we're serving. Maybe it's our clients, maybe it's our families, it doesn't matter. But the point is to get to a place of clarity first. Okay. And so as we start this presentation on housing, Kevin and I will do a little bit of back and forth to explain the slides. I want to give you some context. Okay. First of all, for me, I grew up poor. I grew up living in a mobile home. My sisters and I had two younger sisters. We were in one end of the mobile home. And then, you get like the little bathroom area and the hallway that ran down one side, and then this little tiny kitchen and a living room, if you call it that. And then my parents were in the quote master bedroom at the far side. Okay. So that was, and I didn't even know we were poor. My dad was going through school. He's working on his PhD and then his MBA, ended up doing really well. But just my early years were just really confined. And I remember when he bought our first house, like the world just opened up. I had my own room, right? And so there's something to be said, first of all, for each of us when we have the ability to think bigger, to grow, and we're operating from a place of like stability and safety and security. And for me as a kid, that just like my world opened up. And so I never forgot that, because like I'm fast forward now many years in professional life. And I think when it comes to real estate, we always want to be doing two things well. Okay. We want to be buying for ourselves and advising our clients based on safety and security and stability. And then, and in conjunction with, if it works, we want to say, how do I build wealth through real estate? How do I maximize my investment? How do I give guidance in this area? There's more millionaires made in real estate than any other area, right? It's amazing. We're going to get into some of that. So, but just to share for some context, that's the lens that we're going to be looking at from today is safety and security, buying first for your family, and then making wise investment decisions. Okay. That's so to start there. So there's really three different disciplines and mindsets that I've noticed. And one is making money, one is keeping money, and then the next one is growing money. Three very different disciplines and mindsets: making, keeping, and growing. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is, and I promise you won't be bored, but we're going to expand the world a little bit and have some fresh ideas and some fresh thinking. So as we get into this, we're going to talk about really the basics of what is happening in housing and why it's happening. Okay. There is, when the dust settles, all of the things that we're looking at is going to come down to the fundamentals of economics 101, supply and demand. And this first slide is really fascinating, because the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the demand side. The price of anything in life is going to be some correlation between what's the supply and what's the demand. Guess what, guys? Let's start with the demand. Okay, we're going to unpack the differences between 2022 and 2006, and then the subsequent 7, 8, and 9 years. In this slide, as you guys can see, this is a flow of demographic of birth rates of people being born and then rolling into the marketplace turning 33. Okay, so picture the volume of population of when people turn 33 based on the year. All right, so I'm going to draw your attention to a couple of things. The very first one is there's a red line and a circle, and it says 33 years old in 2006. Okay, you guys see that? There was a pretty dramatic fall off of buyers in their early 30s that would normally roll into the marketplace, that all of a sudden it dropped off pretty significantly. And it held a decline position of new buyers coming into the marketplace for many years. And then you can see it escalate. And I want to draw your attention to the place where it says 33 years old today. Okay. Guess what? That volume of buyers coming in, and then look at the blue arrow pointing up. Guys, we still have 3 to 4 to 5 more years of every single year, the amount of buyers that were in the marketplace last year is going to be greater. Okay. So kind of think of it as if there's 3 million. And actually, when we were down in the 2006, it was kind of 3 million people were turning age 33. Now we're going to be getting into 4 million. So this is the millennial wave, very different from the X generation, obviously very different from the boomers, but I want you guys to see that the very first thing that we want to look at, again, facts, not feelings, we're looking at data. What are the things that are different? What are the things that are the same? The first one that's very different is we had a dramatic reduction of buyers coming to the marketplace in 2006. What do we have right now? We have an influx and a strong, growing, increasing amount of buyers coming into the marketplace. Make sense? Okay, so that's the first slide. I'm going to hat tip it over to Kevin for this second one.
Thank you, Mike. And this shows something very similar, kind of in a different way, though. This is number of potential households nationwide by year, which shows 2007, right leading up to the crash last time, and up to 2020. The trend has kind of continued since then, but the data is up to 2020. Really what this shows is if supply was exactly the same of houses available, do we have more or less demand now versus then? And there's about 12 million more households that are potential buyers now than there were last time leading up to the crash in 07. We've seen that, roughly speaking, about 1 million more per year here on average over the last 12 years. So if inventory was exactly the same as then, we'd still have a much bigger demand pool, much bigger floor of demand, so to speak, this time around. So, which leads to the next question, like, where is inventory? Where is supply on the other side of supply and demand? So if we look at this next slide, the 2 slides here are really interesting on the inventory side. If you've tried to buy a home recently, you know there's nothing for sale, right? Like, there is no inventory available in the market. And the big question is, like, what do the numbers look like, and when's that going to change? So what this shows here is December of each year. It's just kind of the end of the year stats, 07 to 2010 versus 2018 to 2021. What would months of supply of inventory on average? So you see 2007 to 2010, 7, 8, 9, 10 months of supply available. Today it's 2, 3, 4 months. In some markets, like here in Southern California, there's some markets where it's 1, 0, half, whatever it might be. So each market's a little bit different, but on average, 2 big differences right now. A lot more demand coming into the market than there was leading into the crash, and a lot less available on the supply side, which is driving up prices a little more naturally than it drove up last time. We'll talk about some of those other factors as well. Looking at this next slide, this is one other way to illustrate it. This blue chart on the right side here Gabe, that next slide, please. This one right here. So this blue chart on the right side of the screen here, these are inventory levels. And you can see right in the middle of that chart, right at about 2000, leads to about 7 or 8 years of inventory growth. There was rapid expansion going on, rapid building. In 07, there were 3.7 million homes for sale, 3.7 million homes of inventory. That was leading right into that drop off in demand that Mike was talking about a second ago coming into the market. Look from the peak, that dark blue line, until now, where it's right around 1 million, depending on the month, maybe even a little lower. We've seen 15 straight years of drop-offs in inventory levels. Been exacerbated a little bit the last couple of years by COVID, which we'll talk about in a minute. But when clients ask us, hey, are we in a bubble? Just talking about supply and demand, last time leading up to it, we had a ton of supply and a lower amount of demand coming. This time we have almost no supply and a huge base layer of demand that's coming in over the next few years. So it's very similar in the sense that there's a big imbalance, but it's a completely opposite imbalance as last time. So this is one of the facts Mike was talking about, right? Not the feeling like, are we going to crash, but what do the facts show? And what that leads to for a next question is, when is this going to change? Where will new supply come from? And when is that going to happen to start to even things out a little bit, which might get prices under control at that point a little bit. So I'll turn back over to Mike to talk about that a little bit.
So guys, on this same slide here, I want to draw your attention to a couple of different things. The first, if you look at this, where will supply come from? Builders have supply chain and labor issues. I'm going to tell you what happened to a lot of builders. I have a very good friend that's a C-level for a nationwide builder. And one of the challenges that I've heard from him and others is, guess what happened to all builders back in March of 2020, they came to a screeching halt. Why? The whole world shut down for a while. And one of the things I want to explain is it's not just like you come to a halt and then you start up again. Picture you're driving on the freeway and all 4 lanes together, everyone slams on their brakes at the same time. Okay. And then they start driving. What happens to everyone behind them? Okay. There's a wreck. You know, some people screech off to the side. You know, it's just, it causes issues, and it's not like you can just pick it up again. When everyone's driving 80 and then you come to a screeching halt, I don't know. I grew up in Thousand Oaks, so I just know right there on the one, everyone drives like 85 is even slow there. So, but everyone's, if you're going that speed and all of a sudden everyone comes to a halt for like 2 months, and then they start going, maybe some folks can go at the right speed again, but it takes a lot of time to be able to get back up to have the entire freeway going at 80 miles an hour again. It's just the way it is. That happened to everybody. And I'll tell you one thing that happened to a lot of builders. Here's an oversimplified example. Let's just say it cost a builder $450,000 to build a property. I'm going to use one that's probably not the a little lower, but just to make this simple, $450,000 to build. It might be $75,000 to $100,000 of city fees, you know, and then $350,000 of actual building and labor, et cetera, et cetera. And they would sell that house for $500,000. You can do the markup for your area or wherever it is. Okay, for a $50,000 profit. Well, guess what? Builders went under contract, came to a screeching halt, materials and labor and, you know, everything. All of a sudden that same house cost them $525,000 to build instead of $450,000. So there's a lot of builders that are under contract at $500,000 and it costs them more than that to build. Okay, what do you think is going to happen? You probably saw this in the news. Some builders, they reneged on contracts. It got really messy for a while. These are some headlines that took place. So my point in sharing this is that one of the challenges with inventory is that the freeway came to a screeching halt and it's still trying to figure out how to get back going 80 miles an hour again. Okay, that's number one. Number two, I want to talk about something else that's happening. And one of the things I'm sure all you guys have heard is that this wave of forbearances is going to cause the market to crash. It's all going to come just spilling out at once, a flood of inventory. And guess what's going to happen? We're going to crash. Okay, so we're going to speak to that. Facts, not feelings. I have 2 different stories. I'll tell you one of them that will relate specifically to forbearance and foreclosures, and then we'll get into some more charts. Here's the first one. 2 friends, both clients, very similar situations. One had 10 properties, the other had 40. Okay, they've got renters. They don't know what's going to happen. They would get calls from the bank. Go to this website. You can put all your properties into forbearance. The banks made it super easy to move into forbearance, like almost comically easy, making me wonder if there was some additional like behind the scenes incentives. Like, you never really know what games are being played, but both of them said, I might as well. I don't know what's going to happen. My folks, but the people are more or less paying right now, but why not? Let's just be safe. Okay. So they didn't have a true need, but it was an easy on-ramp to be able to move into forbearance. And so what do they do? Right there, 50 properties into forbearance, just like that. Here's my point, guys. When we look at the data, 85% of all the folks that went into forbearance did so based on some sort of just casual opportunity or encouragement, not based on true need or dire related issues. About 15% had real issues and went into forbearance. Here's the point. All of that is rolling back into the market. I just validated one of these stories yesterday from a friend that's close by where I am. And he said, yeah, it was super simple. Go to this website, go into forbearance. And then as I work through the 12 months or 6 months or whatever it was for each one, you just catch up. I've got the money sitting in the bank, or they can tack it onto the loan. And so I did that. Yeah, it caused some problems because people couldn't refinance during that time, et cetera, et cetera. But the point is this, those 5 million homes in forbearance, it's not 5 million homes. It's really now down to less than 1 million. And you guys all know that we're shy, like, what is it, 1.5 million. If all those came on the market at once, it'd be like a big boulder in a pond. It would cause this huge splash and would go back to normal. Why? Because we're short way more than that in the actual inventory needed. Okay, so I want to share that. Let's go to the next slide. And you will see what I'm talking about. Loans still in forbearance. You guys see this? Okay, look where we are from May of 2020 all the way down to January of 2022. It's a really small percentage. So the reason I show this, guys, is that there's a lot of talk out there saying that this is a major issue, and it isn't. It's not an issue. We need that inventory. If everybody in forbearance were to put a for sale sign up right now, guess what? It would be absorbed. It would be, you guys would be ecstatic because you'd have houses to sell, right? That's what would happen. Everybody would. So we share this slide, guys, because this is one of the things that there's some false information about that we keep seeing in the marketplace. You guys see some of the headlines out there talking about foreclosures. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, I want to draw your attention to what we see in the headlines and then what is really happening. Look at this. U.S. foreclosures surge in January after end of pandemic freeze. U.S. foreclosures are the highest since pandemic start. Okay, we see a lot of this stuff, guys, that makes our clients and the consumers and the buyers think that something is going to be something's very, very wrong, and there's something very uncomfortable coming. You guys want to see, Kevin's going to talk through this next chart, but look at the next chart to see what is actually happening with percentage of distressed property sales.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So on the left side of the chart is about 2012. And I know it's a little bit small maybe on your screen. On the right side of the chart is today. And these are the percentage of sales of properties that are foreclosures and short sales, right? Properties that are distressed that would drive down prices in the market. On the left side of the chart, some of those numbers are 20, 25, 30%, depending on the year, at kind of the height of the housing crisis. Today, on the right side, it's right around 1%. That number 4% was right during kind of when COVID was getting started. A lot of prices have run up since then, obviously, which has driven it down about 1%. So 1% of sales are distressed nationwide right now as of January. That's the huge increase that, like those headlines we're talking about that Mike said. So it's always good to keep that perspective that there just simply aren't that many properties that don't have equity. And there's a couple reasons for that. The next slide, one thing that shows a little bit of a big difference now versus then, this is the volume of loans written with a credit score below 620. So one of the big things as well, this is fairly well known now, is what drove the housing crisis to really explode last time, 2007 to 2010. Look at all the loans being written 2003 to 2007 on the left side of that chart. And credit score is just one way to measure it. I know it's not the end all be all, but those are loans being written with less than a 620 credit score. And then in blue is since, that's 2008 until 2021. Totally different ballgame now with the amount of people that are going to have to, at some point, probably defaults on the loan. This is one measurement of it, obviously, is just much, much lower. One of the other big differences is equity in properties, right? You can't foreclose or short sell most of the time if you have great equity. And because of the run up in prices the last few years, some interesting stats here, 95% of people nationwide, of homeowners nationwide, have at least 10% equity as of January. 37%, a third, I know this isn't totally conducive to Southern California, but a third don't have any mortgage at all, they're paid off. Compare that to 2007 to 2009, in the top right there, 26%, 1 in 4 homes in 2009 were underwater. They owed more than they were worth. Today, that number is about 1%. So that number of homes underwater, that percentage, really corresponds to the distressed sales percentage as well, right? About 25% to about 1%. We just have a much firmer foundation from an equity standpoint that really doesn't provide a lot of proof that there's going to be a lot of foreclosures and short sales that drive down the market. And that's really the advice we give our clients when they're waiting for a deal. These are the stats that show you might be waiting a while, right? Because there's such a solid foundation compared to last time.
So guys, think about this. Back in 2007 and 8 and 9, you would have your neighbor across the street and one on either side. One would be free and clear, one would be underwater. Okay, it was just a complicated time. And one was probably right here on the edge and the other one had a little bit of equity. Now you look up and down the street around the corner, 1 out of 100 homes happens to be underwater. It is just a different game right now, a different game. Okay, so We share this for perspective. Again, facts, not feelings. In order for something to crash, there has to be a faulty foundation or something that is an undercurrent that's extremely unhealthy. And as we're looking at all these things, we're going to get to one that's starting to become an issue that we want to talk about. Okay. We'll get there in a second, but what we want to do first is we want to look at how strong is the foundation. And then we also want to look at the trends. The trend is your friend, demographics is destiny. Okay. The trend is your friend, demographics is destiny. We have a demographic wave that's very, very different right now that I talked about on the first slide. So, okay, let's move to the other one, which is, okay, are things affordable? Are we getting out of reach? What does that look like? Because that's a big problem. It's becoming a problem for a lot of people, but we want to share some perspective. Okay. Here is a chart that shows a couple things. This first line is showing 2006. We're taking an example of a property that was 600,000. Interest rates are about 6.25 at that time. Let's just say the income for that individual was 10,000 a month and the mortgage payment was 2,900, call it 3,000. Okay, about 30% of someone's income. Kind of traditional. What we see just on the lending front is if we see folks that have their income, we can improve higher than that. There's circumstances when it's warranted, et cetera, et cetera. But the point is, rule of thumb for somebody to have about 1/3 of their income going to housing payment seems reasonable, right? Or all debt. Now, a lot of this was actually, we won't get into why it was here, but this was becoming an affordability issue. But these were also, a lot of these were written with people that we don't know if that number was true, right? Because they were stated income loans, and there's a whole series of other things. That's not the point of this. What I want to show you is, let's draw affordability to today. That same home value at 600,000, it probably dropped to 450 or 400 depending on the area. Again, very different circumstances. And now it's up at 846. I don't think there's anything at 846 in your area. You guys are saying if you find one, I will sell it. Okay. But bear with us for the example. Interest rates, 4.5, even creeping closer toward 5. Monthly payment, 3,400. So it's a little higher, but guys, look at this. Household income, all things equal. This is how people make decisions. They're doing it based off of a percentage of their budget, right? There's a psychological undercurrent, which is, I know in my mind, if I make X amount, I can have about X amount go to my housing related expense and other debt. Household income is up 55% from 2006. That same individual, that same family that had $10,000 of income, that same family now, based on normal growth of inflation, we'll talk about inflation in a minute, but increase in wages is at 15.5. What does that mean? Their percentage of payment is less. Okay. Now, guys, this can't run on forever. We can't run on forever. We have a what if here. As things climb, you guys know this, but as home values climb and interest rates climb, that's kind of a double whammy on affordability. Okay. So what happens? We start to creep up, but my point is that same family can be paying $4,300 a month instead of $3,000, all things equal, which means there's more room in housing to grow. This doesn't go on forever, but the runway is longer than people think. Makes sense? Okay, so I say that, and then I want to get to this next slide, which is going to illustrate why the runway is longer. So if we can go to the next slide on here, Gabe, this right here is something really interesting, guys. Take a look at this. Someone that has income of $15,000 a month and a mortgage payment of $3,000 a month. And just, this is an example. I want to illustrate the math here. You can adjust it for whatever area it is. We've got folks that see this in middle America. We've got folks that are at the beach. So it's going to be different based on your area. But $15,000 a month, let's just say a mortgage payment is $3,000 a month. If there's a 12% rise in prices, guys, how much does the mortgage payment go up? It goes up by $360. Well, guess what? Someone's income only needs to go up by 2.4% to offset that increase in payment. Okay. That's something that gets lost a lot of times because the thought process is if houses went up 18%, which I think is the number last year that we're settling on for, for California, then guess what we need? We need wages to go up to, what would that be? Kevin can probably do this in his head, about 3.5%. Wages would need to go up to offset the exact increase of an 18% increase in values. So I say this, guys, not because it doesn't mean anything. It just means that the runway is longer than people are expecting. Okay. So that is affordability. Kevin, I don't know if you have anything to add on that, or we can get to the next slide and talk about inflation.
I think you covered it. That's perfect. This is some of the nitty gritty stuff now that people want to hear, I'm sure.
All right. So guys, inflation, that's the buzzword today, right? That is the buzzword. You can't walk out of your house without getting hit in the face with an inflation headline. So, right. So let's stay on this chart for a second right here. Guys, here's what we know. Inflation is real estate is one of the best hedges against inflation. Why? Because they typically run hand in hand. If you look, you can see we've got, this is by decade, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. Okay, you can see the green is home appreciation and the blue is inflation rate. Okay, guess what's happened every time we've had inflation? Real estate has run with it and outpaced it by a little bit. My personal opinion for people that are concerned about real estate and they don't want to invest their cash and put a down payment and then have that $1 million property be worth, $750,000 in a couple of years, which really is the underlying reason of why people wouldn't do something. And guys, think about it. It's a fair thought. Everyone that's buying today, you know what their memories are? Their memories are their parents or uncle or whoever it was that had a property. And guess what happened to that property? They lost it, right? It was a train wreck. And they remember that. That leaves scars for people, psychological scars. So there's a lot of people that are thinking, we saw a run up like this. We're seeing a run up now. I know what happens after a run up. It comes down. It's going to come down again. That's what is burned into people's psyches. And that is the reason that we go through and we look at the map. The reason I show this chart is because there's something else happening right now. We were in a deflationary environment then. We're in an inflationary environment now. Okay, what does that mean? You can see the blue for 2021. My contention would be as we roll out whatever inflation looks like for this decade, real estate will be pretty close to it as far as appreciation. We're seeing a gap right now because there's a whole separate seminar on this, but there's a gap here right now because we've got more liquidity in the marketplace than we've had in a century. 2007, 8, 9, we had less liquidity in the market than we've had in a century. Okay, so I bring this up because people that are holding on to cash in an inflationary market right now, at least the way this chart shows, it was like 6.9%. If I'm reading that right, it's called 7%. Maybe it's higher. You can look at shadow stats. You can all decide where inflation is. I get it's hard to get real data these days. Okay, but the point is, if it's a 7% inflationary, if it's 7% inflation, guess what? Somebody that sits on $100,000 of cash for a year, they very adeptly turn that $100,000 into $93,000 of purchasing power if we have 7% inflation. The point being, my contention would be, it may be safer to be in real estate. Why? Because all of these things the tides go together. Wages will eventually catch up. I mean, I don't know if they catch up this. I mean, the people that get burned are folks that are holding cash where wages don't increase at the same pace as inflation. That's a separate conversation. But I share this, guys, because this is something that clients need to understand to make good, solid decisions. And if we go to the next slide, let's look at what some experts say. Real estate is one of the time-honored inflation hedges. Tangible asset, those tend to hold their value when inflation reigns, unlike paper assets. More specifically, as prices rise, so do values. Okay, so guys, these are the things that I think are really important for us to understand as professionals and in giving guidance and making healthy decisions for our family. There's a lot of confusion out there. Okay, there's a lot of confusion, and we bring this up. In fact, Gabe, if we can go to the next slide, and then we'll maybe open up for a little bit of Q&A. Circle of cash flow. Guys, this is really important. Our firm is set up specifically to help in this. There's a confusing spot I've found. My background just is as a financial advisor. That was my formal training before moving into the mortgage business and real estate investing. And so what we found is that there is a mortgage professional, financial advisor, real estate professional, and CPA. And right in the middle is where there's confusion. Okay, honestly, that's why one of the reasons that we really appreciate Cheryl Lynn is that she has a heart to serve in the middle too. Not all professionals want to truly care and connect and help the client. Okay, most people kind of just do their own thing, but there's a spot right here that if we can serve, and again, Cheryl, I gotta give a hat tip to you, because it's really rare to find people that truly care about going into this center spot where people need help and guidance. Okay. I think anytime we're going to do business, we need to do business with people that have character, people that are competent, and people that have compassion or caring, right? Those 3 C's right there: character, competent, and compassionate. And I think when you have something and again, Sherilyn, I appreciate you allowing us to speak here, but when you find people that have those 3 C's, that's someone you want to hang on to, because you know that they're going to be doing what's in your best interest, not their own. So this is the space, guys, that we really feel called to serve in the marketplace, is to help in this in-between spot. And yes, we do a great job with loans, all that stuff, but I think what people need, we actually have some more slides we can get to, but not yet. I want to open it up maybe just for some questions first, but there's a couple things that might help with big picture on planning and strategy. But guys, this is the stuff we wanted to share with you today. This is what's the undercurrent that's happening. And I'll just do a real quick synopsis of this. 2022 versus 2006, liquid market versus frozen market, owner occupied for the most part versus high speculation. There's more investors coming in the market. We can talk about that. Qualified versus unqualified loans, increasing buyer flow versus decreasing buyer flow. Okay. Tight inventory versus excess inventory, strong employment versus very weak employment, and then affordable versus unaffordable becoming an issue. Affordability is becoming an issue. That's not lost on me for a second, but those are the things that we want to show in terms of what's the same and what's different. So Sherilyn, we're going to hit pause here and see if we want to do any questions or get into any of the strategies for offers, but I want to bring this back to you.
Thank you. This is such good information. And that's why it was really important to me to have this seminar, because there is such false information out there, and people believe it and they buy into it and then they repeat it. And I like that you talk about facts. Here's the facts. We're not focused on the feelings. Although I tend to be a feeling person, but I love the facts. So this was really good. I want to open it up to questions. Does anybody have any questions? Just unmute yourself and feel free to ask a question.
And if anyone wants to form a question, I'll just share something kind of cool. I have an 8th grader, my youngest. I've got 4 kids, but my youngest is in 8th grade, and I get to drop him off at school every day. And so one of the things I tell him is, Caleb's his name. I'm like, Caleb, you have control of 3 things in your life. You can bring your best attitude, you can have courage, and you can bring your best effort. Those are the things you can control. Nothing else you have control over. Attitude, courage, and effort. And bring that today. Okay. And that's ACE is our little acronym for it. So be an ACE today. So I say that because that's what we get to control in life. All right. Attitude, courage, and effort. And when we do that, it doesn't always work out for us, but it works out for us way more than if we don't. Way more, right? Way more. It's like planting a whole bunch of seeds, and you don't know if every seed is going to grow, but when you bring a best attitude, have high level of courage, and bring your best effort, good things happen. And my point in sharing that is that in this marketplace, Guys, it's hard getting offers accepted. We can talk about it if you want, Cheryl. There's some tactics for that work really well. But what I know is that when we bring those three things to the table, I firmly believe that when we do everything to the extent that we can, we open up opportunities that we never could have even seen before, and things just sort of come our direction. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you. Hope you guys will indulge me with my comments with my 8th grader.
I love that. Be an ace.
I actually have a quick question for you, Sherilyn, if no one else does. Interest rates have risen pretty substantially over the last few months. I was curious if you and your team are seeing any difference in like levels of competition because of that, or if it just, hasn't even made a drop in the bucket yet from what you've seen on listings and, amounts of offers, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I wrote 2 offers yesterday, 2 days ago, excuse me. I was hoping that it was going to soften up.
Right.
But the demand is so high. The 2 offers that we wrote were right around the 800 range, first-time buyers. And one listing agent said they had 30 offers. Wow. They were only countering 3, and we didn't get countered. And then the other property had 19 offers. So, I mean, that might be more just a price point item, because that's kind of the new first-time buyer price point, which is horrifying when you think about it. 800,000 for a first-time buyer. That's like, it's just a lot. And so anyway, so I'm not seeing it soften yet, but that was just in the last couple of days.
Makes sense. I've heard similar stories from our clients still out there. So I think, it kind of just speaks to the supply versus demand, and we still have room on affordability. People can still afford their payments there. So that's really interesting to know. It'd be interesting to see over the next few months if that has any impact at all.
Could you guys discuss your certified home buyer program and how you lock in the rates, that kind of thing? Because I think some people would be really interested to know that.
Sure, that'd be great. And what we do a little bit differently for clients of Sherilyn, her team, is called our certified home buyer approval. And if you've gone to get a loan before, qualify for a mortgage, you typically get like a pre-qualification or a pre-approval. And what we do a little bit different with the certified home buyer, that's just a huge advantage for our clients. We do a full underwrite up front before they're in escrow to buy. So typically a pre-approval letter means someone like myself or Mike or Gabe, we've reviewed the financials. It looks good. We're pretty confident there's going to be a loan there, but the final underwriter doesn't get involved till you're in escrow. So you have money on the line, you have a house on the line without 100% certainty in the loan. And what we do differently at Churchill, we give that full certainty up front. We get the full approval done up front. And that gives us negotiating power, right? When Sherilyn and her team write an offer, then we can close much quicker, right? We're basically an appraisal away from closing in some cases. We can also potentially waive a loan contingency if that approval is very clean, which is one less contingency for the seller to worry about. There's, depending on down payment, we can talk about appraisal strategies, but that certified home buyer is really the biggest advantage we're seeing in the market. Over the last 12 to 18 months with this strategy, we've had about 30% of our offers get accepted. And the industry average, the latest data I've seen, depending on the market, is about 1 in 8 to 1 in 10 with just a normal pre-approval to get it accepted. Might be a little lower, might be a little higher depending on the market, but we can increase those odds dramatically just by doing that extra work and presenting the offer the right way. One other benefit Sherilyn mentioned with that program is called our Rate Secure program. As soon as you're approved by underwriting, we can put a cap on your interest rate for 90 days while you shop. So most of the time while you're shopping for a home, before you have one of the big factors, like, hey, if rates rise, the payment that the purchase price you can qualify for is going to change depending on the payment. Our Rate Secure program gives you a worst case scenario for 90 days based on where the rate is at that time. The best part of the program, in my opinion, there's absolutely no obligation to go with that rate. If you get into escrow, call it 30 or 60 days later, we look at the interest rate that day and we look at our cap, and you get the better one with no questions asked. There's no penalty at all. This is just a very simple way of showing that you're protected, I guess, from rising rates is the main factor here. So that's kind of the outline of the program. We can certainly go deeper on it with anyone who has questions on it, but that's kind of the basics of that program.
Yeah, and Cheryl Lynn too, just to piggyback on what Kevin said, guys, the goal is to give every single client the peace of mind that the underwriting is already done and all they have to do is find a house. And then also in this market, what we want to do is we want to simplify the job for the listing agent and communicate very clearly that this client has already been underwritten, the heavy lifting on the loan is done. We can close in, 3 weeks, you tell us when you'd like us to close. And it will be, and we actually send a video to that listing agent also explaining it, because sometimes people get confused. You guys know on the new RPA, there's the 3 different options. So the one that we want to be checking every single time is fully underwritten. We call it being positioned like cash. That's our kind of our tagline on that. And looks like Gabe has up an example. This is the rate secure program. The market was at 4.5, and we had a client locked in at 4.25. So you can see that that's $9 grand saved and 40,000 over the life of the loan, all things equal. So guys, there's what we're doing. How is this happening? You say, we are hedging the market behind the scenes, the bond market, in order to be able to protect the rate for the client. So Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but after 90 days, we just need to be in escrow in 90 days. And I can't remember if it's 30 or 60 days after. So we've had a client that they got the rate secure in place. They're just now closing, and they had the rate secure in place back when rates were, 5/8 or 75 basis points lower than today. I think we even had one that was even in the 3s that is just closing. Kev, if you would just tell that story real quick, because that's a big win that I think we can share.
Yeah, there's a client specifically, and timing just worked out perfectly for this client, but their rate secure cap was a 3.5% rate. They had about 2 weeks left on the cap, and rates were touching right up against 5 when they got in escrow. So they saved about 1.5% on an $800,000 or $900,000 loan. I mean, that's $12,000 a year in interest, right? I mean, it was just a huge deal for the client. So not every client uses it. Sometimes rates go down in any given window, but over the last few months, especially, this is a program where our clients have just saved thousands and thousands of dollars by being part of this program.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, Cheryl, and I appreciate the chance to talk about that.
Yeah, they were at 5.5, right? So
You're right.
if you had somebody that had already gone through this process of getting certified, becoming a certified home buyer, and were locked in, I mean, that's a beautiful thing for your clients to be able to save money. I mean, everybody would like an extra $12,000 in their pocket for the year. That's a family vacation, right? So.
Gas, for heaven's sakes.
Right, exactly. Oh my gosh. I've been driving to Long Beach from Ventura County quite a bit. My brother's pretty sick right now, but I've been driving back and forth, and I'm like, man, every time I go down twice, I think I'm filling up my tank. $115 yesterday. It's like unbelievable. But anyway, so any other questions?
Hey, I have a question.
Yes.
I was asking, how long is the rate locked in for or guaranteed for?
Kevin, you want to answer?
I would love to, no problem. Yep. So once we get approved by underwriting with that certified homebuyer program, there's a 90-day window where the rate's protected. So you have 90 days from that point basically to get into escrow. And then we formally lock in the rate for 30 days or more or less, depending on the length of the escrow, once you're there. So you have 90 days basically to get into contract, and then we lock the better of the two, the cap or the market. At that point, you typically have, sometimes a 20-day escrow, sometimes 30 or 40, but it's really that 90-day window that's really relevant. If we get outside that 90-day window, there's no penalty, fee, or anything like that. We just have to put a new 90-day cap at place based on the rates there on, day 90, so to speak. So you can't extend the actual cap at that point. So good question. Yeah, no real downside there. We can keep it going indefinitely as long as you're still shopping. It's just each 90 days, we have to update the rates based on where the market's at.
Got it. Thank you. And do you guys offer ARMs, or is that something you offer your clients, or?
We do. We have several different ARM programs, just depending on what's right for that client. Sometimes in really low rate environments like we've been in, there's not a big discount with ARMs. As rates start to go up, it becomes more and more intriguing. So that really what we would propose would just depend on the client's goals. Most of the business that we do is fixed rate, just given that that's what most people want. But we certainly have the ability to help with those other types of programs if needed.
Got it. Thank you.
And the market, Robert, the market is just the secondary market's complicated on the ARM products at the moment. So they're just starting to open up. I mean, it's been a long time. So one of the challenges right now is that there's some competing forces economically that are taking place. And, if we head into a recession, it's not out of the question that there's a window of time where interest rates actually come down for a while on the long bond. Right, it'd be an inverted yield curve, but where the longer term bond and mortgage rates come down some, and as a result, most ARM products, because of the, there's a concern of what's called runoff and EPO. So there's a potential that that ARM products get put in place and then they get refinanced right away if rates come down. So investors are pricing those pretty heavy. So a long way of saying they're available. They're not ideal right now, but we do expect them to move out into the marketplace as we find a place of stability.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great question, Robert. Anybody else? Jump in. Don't be shy. All right. Well, if there's no further questions, Churchill, do you have anything else that you'd like to share?
It's Sherilyn, it's an honor to present with you. I mean, we really appreciate who you are. Our business model is to do business with like-minded people, and we were talking about the character, competence, and compassion. And I think that's something that's special these days in this market. So we're just real grateful for the opportunity to present to you. And guys, like all things in life, like we get to control our attitude, we get to control our courage, we get to control our effort. And I think my parting message would be, let's all bring that to the table and to our clients, to our families each day. And when we do that, we make the world a better place. So I appreciate the time to present on behalf of the Churchill crew here.
Thank you very much. That's I really am honored to work with you guys as well. So thank you so much for really taking the time with clients. A lot of lenders move so fast, but you guys really take the time. One thing that you shared with me in the very beginning that I was really impressed with was you go back to the client once a year at least to look at their overall financial health and advise that way. So that's a really great thing to do, and I appreciate that. So, well, with that, I thank you guys for sharing your lunch with us today. Hope you did get some lunch, and love to connect with you. If you are not in any of our team's client appreciation program, I know they would love to enter you in that. So our next upcoming client appreciation party is going to be our Holy Guacamole Party. It's on April 30th at the Avocado Ranch. And basically we will have ripe avocados for you, and you just bring your favorite ingredients for your favorite guacamole recipe. And then we're going to have chips and drinks and have some fun. So April 30th, just mark your calendars that afternoon, and you'll get an invitation from your agent. So thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sherilyn, so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.